Most of the people who work with Power Query just go with the default settings. But there are some settings in Power Query that you can change, and that would tremendously improve the performance of your queries and make the experience of working with it a lot smoother. So in this video, I'm going to show you 7 such settings that will make Power Query a lot better to use. So let's see what these are. Now, before I tell you the settings that needs to be changed, let me quickly tell you how to access these settings. So here I have an Excel file and I'm going to cover Power Query within Excel. Power Query is also in Power BI. Now, some of the settings I'm going to tell you are also there in Power BI, but some don't make for Power BI, so they're not there. I'm going to be covering purely Excel and Power Query in Excel. Now, to access the settings option, you go to the data tab here, and here in get and transform group, click on the get data option. And then here you have this query options thing. And when you click on it, it is going to open the query options dialog box. So you can see I have this dialog box here and I have two options, the global settings and the current workbook settings. Now, global settings are global, so that would be applied to Power Query and any workbook that you work with. But current workbook settings are the ones that are only going to be applied for the current workbook. Now, if you open Power Query, then you can also access the same settings from Power Query as well. So let me open Power Query. So I already have this sample query made here. And when I open Power Query, you can also get the same settings by going to the file option, and here in options and settings, click on query options, and again it is going to open the same dialog box. Also, one more thing is, let me close this. When you have this queries and connections pane in Excel and you right click on any of the query, then you have these properties option, and when you click on it, it also opens query properties dialog box, and there are some settings that we will be changing here as well. Now let me show you the settings that we need to change. So let's start with an important setting that will save you a lot of headache. So here I have this Power Query editor, and you can see I have these 3 queries. So I started working with the sales data query, and all these other queries are the ones that I created. Now, as of now, if I go to file and then click on close and load, it is going to load all of these 3 queries as 3 separate worksheets on my Excel workbook. But I do not want them. Maybe I do not want any of them on my workbook, or maybe I want just one of them. So what you need to do is go to the file option, then go to option and settings, and then click on query options. So this opens the query options dialog box. And here in the global settings, go to data load. And here you will see by default, it uses something called a standard load settings. And if you hover the cursor over this information icon, it'll tell you that it is going to load each query in the workbook. What we need to do is click this option, specify custom default load settings, and uncheck this load to worksheet. So what it is going to do is, because it is not loading to worksheet or a data model, it is going to automatically load it as a connection. See what happens when I click OK. And now when I go to file and then click on close and load, it is not going to put any query in the workbook, but all of these queries would come here as connection only. So this is going to save you a lot of headache. Now let's say if you want to get one of these queries actually in the workbook. So you can simply right click, go to load to, and then from here you can choose what you want. For example, if I want this in the workbook, I can simply come here, go to table, and then click on new worksheet, and then click OK. So it is going to load that data in the workbook. So you can choose which queries can be loaded, but by default, all the queries are going to be loaded as connection only. Whenever you import data into Power Query adds an additional step called changed type. You can see here I have source and then I have the change type step. Now Power Query tries to determine the kind of data that is there in each column and then assign a data type to that column. For example, in this case, Power Query decided that product ID is a numeric data type column. So everything in this column is a number. In order date column, it is a date and time data type, and in value, it is a numeric data type. Now, the thing with this is that many times Power Query can be wrong. In this case, for example, if I go to the source step, you can see that in product ID, I have numbers, but these have leading zeros. So when Power Query determined that this is a number, it changed it to a numeric data type and it removed the leading zeros. Similarly, in case of, let's say, values, it identified that these are numbers, but the problem here is that it only tries to check this based on the first 1,000 rows. But there is a possibility that after the 1,000 rows, there could be blank cells, there could be text values, there could be, let's say, hyphens or something like not available, and those would be missed, and Power Query would assign this column as the numeric data type. So in such cases, it it is a good idea to remove the change type step. But what you can also do is change the settings so that this step is never added. So to do that, I'm going to go to the File tab here, then go to Options and Settings, then click on Query Options. This is going to open the query options dialog box, where within global, I'm going to go to data load, and in type detection, choose this option called never detect column types and headers for unstructured sources. Now, when I click OK, it will never add this change type step. So you can continue with the work in your query. And in the end, you can manually change the data type of the columns that you want. When you're working with a very large data set, let's say millions of rows of data, or your queries are doing a lot of transformation and connecting to many different sources, then your queries might be slow. For example, here I have this query, it's 5 million rows of data. Now, to be honest, it's not very slow because it's local data. But if I come here and I refresh it, you'll see that it takes a few seconds, probably more than 10-15 seconds to completely refresh the data. But if you are working and you're connecting to different data sources and some of the data sources are slow, then this could be even slower. So what you can do is speed it up by enabling a setting called fast data load. So to do that, I'm going to go to the data tab, and here in get data, go to query options. And within query options, I would go to data load. And here I have this option called fast data load. If you look at this information, it says by enabling the fast load option, your queries will take less time to load, but Excel may be unresponsive for long periods. Now, to be honest, when I tested it with the kind of data I work with, I did not feel the need to check this option. But if you are feeling that your queries are loading slowly, you can try this option. If you're working with a lot of queries and you think that your Power Query is slow, here is a setting you can change. Go to the File tab here and go to Options and Settings, then Query Options. And here in the current workbook, come to data load, and here you have this option allow data preview to download in the background. Make sure that this is unchecked. So if this is checked, you need to uncheck this option. Now what this does is whenever you click on a query, and whenever you open any query in Power Query, it downloads this 1000 rows preview for each query. But when that option is unchecked, it is going to not download this preview for all the queries unless you have selected them. So for example, if I've selected this query, it shows me the preview for all the steps in this query, but it doesn't download the preview for all the remaining queries. So if you're working with a lot of queries, say 10, 20, 30 queries, then it is not going to download this preview data for all those queries unless you select them. So this is going to speed up your work a little bit. Another useful setting is to get the information about the columns in your Power Query preview data. For example, here I have this data, and if I go to the View tab, you'll see that there are these two options that are unchecked by default, but then you can check them. It's called column distribution and column profile. Let me show you what it does. So I have all these columns here, and if I check these options, they are going to tell me about these columns, some information that could be useful. For example, if I check this option column distribution, see what happens. It shows me this data for each column in my data set. So it tells me that how many distinct and unique values are there. For example, in case of region, if I go through it, I want my data set to have 4 different regions, but I can see that there are 7, which means that there is some data quality issue in this. Maybe there are some misspelled regions, or there is something else going on here. Similarly, in case of product, if I know that there are 8 products and it shows me 8 distinct values here, then I know that my data is right. Now, one important thing to note here is that it is going to show you this column distribution for the first 1000 rows only. Now, if you want to get it for your entire data set, come here to the status bar and then click on this option and then check column profiling based on entire data set. And when you do that, it is going to go through your entire data set and do this for all the columns. Now, one caveat here is that if you have a large data set, then this could take some time. For example, I tried it for 50,000 rows and it took a few seconds. But if you have millions of rows of data, then this might take even few minutes. So be aware of that. Also, if you have these separate steps, now in this case, I only have 2 steps, but if you have multiple steps, whenever you select a step, this process is going to happen again. So it's going to recalculate for that specific step. So it may take a little more time, but it is very useful in giving you information about each column, whether there are errors or if something is there which is not looking right. Another option you have is the column profile, where it is going to give you the profile of the selected column. For example, in this case, I have selected, let's say I select the region column. Now, when I click on column profile, it opens this pane here, and it gives me the information about that column. So column statistics and the value distribution. Now you can see that there are misspelled words for these regions. So instead of north, I have NORT. So I can quickly see what is going on here, and it gives me a little more information. So instead of me going into the data and finding the issues, I can quickly check the quality of the data in each column and overall in the entire data set by using column distribution and column profile. Queries do not automatically refresh when you reopen the file. So here I have this file and I have this query, and if I hover the cursor over it, you can see it says last refreshed 5:06 p.m. Now, if I close this file and I open it after a few minutes, it would still show me last refreshed at 5:06 p.m. because this query would not automatically refresh. So if you want your queries to refresh when you open the file, you can do that. To do that, I would come here to the query name, right click, and then go to properties. And here I would check this option called refresh data when opening the file. By default, this option is unchecked. So check this option, click OK. And now when you save the file and you open it again, your query would automatically refresh. So here I have this query called data, and I have a CSV file in the backend. So I've used that CSV file. I imported the data from that CSV file into this query, did some transformation, and then loaded this data into this Excel table. Now this Excel table has been used to create this pivot table. Now I want to show you a refresh setting that causes a very unique problem. So in this case, if I right click on the query and then go to properties, in this dialog box, you'll have this option enable background refresh, and this is checked by default. Now, the problem with this option is that if I now go to refresh all button here and then click on refresh all, it is going to refresh everything simultaneously, including the query, including the table, and the pivot table. But the problem is that pivot table is very quick to refresh and update. So pivot table is done updating, but at the same time, the query is still updating, which means that by the time the query is refreshed and updated, the pivot table has already updated and it does not have the new data. Let me show you. So I'll go back to the CSV file that I've used. And in this case, let me change this value here in the CSV file. Let me make it a really large value so it will be apparent in the pivot table. Now I'll save this file. And now I go back here and let me open the pivot table. Now, when I click on refresh all, I would expect the pivot table to update with the new numbers. And I would also expect the query to also update. See what happens when I click on refresh all, pivot table hasn't updated. But if I go here to the query, you can see the query has updated. If I go to the table, you can see the table has also updated, but the pivot table has not updated. So I would have to go back and I would have to click on refresh all again, and then it updates the pivot table. So I would have to refresh this twice. And the problem here is that this can cause issues. You may not realize that the pivot table is not an updated pivot table. So what we can do is simply go back to this properties option and then uncheck this option. So this will make sure that when we click on refresh all, the query is refreshed first and then rest of the things are refreshed. So when you uncheck this option, everything should work perfectly. That's it in this video. I hope you found this useful. Also, if you're liking these videos, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and click on the bell icon so that you never miss out on any new Excel tips video I come up with. Thank you and have a nice day.